I'm a robot vacuum cleaner, so yeah, I got one gig. I suck up dirt, so pardon my inferiority complex about Geico, who does so much more. Like, not only could they save their customers money on car insurance, but they got fast and friendly claim service too, and an award-winning mobile app. Plus access to licensed agents 24/7. Who am I kidding? I can't even do corners. Uh-oh, choking hazard.
Popcorn kernels.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
We are hoping that your Monday is getting off to a good start because we have taken to the streets. The bus has brought us to Mercedes-Benz Stadium here in Hotlanta, Georgia, where tonight the college football season will come to a dramatic end as Alabama and Georgia inside the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, home of the Atlanta Falcons, will decide once and for all who will wear the crown of 2017 national champions when it comes to college football. And with that, welcome in to a Monday morning here at Golic and Wingo. Glad you're with us. We have a few people with us over there, the brave souls that have ventured out this morning. To all of you, I say, what is wrong with you? But we are glad you are here with us. Trey Wingo, Mike Golic Jr., Golic and Wingo on the road here in Atlanta. Hey. Happy road trip.
You know, never has 31 degrees felt so balmy. You know, all three of us came from Connecticut. A lot of the crew here came from Connecticut. When we left the other day, it was -8. So now it's 31 degrees, and I feel like I should have shorts and a T-shirt on.
Well, thank God you don't.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I understand why the locals down here are a little more dressed up because they're not used to this. But it is, it's clear, it's dry, it's a little chilly. We do thank everybody for coming out, especially those parents. There's some kids over there who are not going to send their kids to school today. I think that's a positive note, right? That they're going to Golic and Wingo learn today,
which means they'll learn nothing.
I think. I think right sitting next to me is a perfect example of sometimes when Mike missed school for things that we had to do. I think you were came out just fine because you learned at bending at my knee.
It was a great way to learn what not to do. So I always appreciate that example that you provided.
See, that's a great point. There's two sides to everything. It's not what you should do; it's what you shouldn't, and that's what you learned by coming on the road with your father.
Perceptive enough. So I think we've got a perceptive group right here. It's coming out and supporting what will already be a disputed national championship after the parade yesterday.
Oh, my gosh, stop it. Well, just stop it. The real national championship is tonight. And what's so wild about this one is both teams basically can it's either a short flight or a short drive for teams to get, or fans really, to get where they want to be.
Well, Georgia's already been here, done this. And this stadium,
how about it?
This is where they took down Auburn for the SEC Championship Part 1. And now they're getting the sequel in the same building with Alabama. Again, we are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests will join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And we have a cavalcade of stars lining up to join us today. If you take a look at the guests for the day, we have Booger McFarland, our college football analyst. He'll join us on set. He can also talk about the wild card weekend game in the NFL that we had Saturday and Sunday. Todd McShay will be here in the 8 o'clock hour. Todd, of course, will talk about all the NFL draft prospects that'll be on the field. We'll have a few, specifically when you look at the front seven from Alabama, but there'll be a ton of players on that field tonight that will be in the draft coming up in April.
Well, I mean, already you look at the talent going in and coming out, and this discussion came up when you talk about best conferences, and you look at the talent guys bring in. Alabama going into this game tonight has 37 Under Armour All-Americans. That's more than the other 3 teams from the college football playoff combined.
Yeah, that is really good. Unfortunately, they are missing a linebacker and an offensive lineman for tonight. We've got a lot to get into, obviously, with that game, and we can draw on your experience from a few years ago of kind of the time off and getting ready for a game this big when you played in the national championship game and lost to Alabama. But still, the preparation for it. And really what an advantage it can be for a team like Alabama who's used to having that amount of time off and getting ready for a game.
I'm glad you brought that up because that dovetails very nicely in what you talked about in what Mike learned coming on the road, what not to do. We can ask Junior what not to do in a national championship game because obviously it didn't work out for you guys.
We got a hopper full of tips as far as what will get you not blown out in this game. Just follow the blueprint from 2012, and I promise you'll be in good hands if you run the exact opposite direction.
And again, other guests coming up today. Maria Taylor, our ESPN college football reporter, will join us on set, and David Pollack will join us as well during the 9 o'clock hour. And we may see David ingest something that he hasn't ingested in a long, long time.
Yeah, we may. Looking forward to that. And when he can't finish it or do it, then the Golic boys are here to clean up the
mess,
slack of that.
Because there will be some mess. For those that don't know, David Pollack is one of these purists who only eats certain things. He hasn't had sugar, he said, how many years?
I think 10 years.
He hasn't had sugar in 10 years. And he said if Georgia, his alma mater, made it to the national championship game, he would eat donuts.
Yeah.
We've got the donuts.
What we have. The Golic and Wingo show, the shows never go anywhere without donuts. We always have them with us. We bring them in our carry-on all the time. That's how much they're with us. So we will have donuts for David Pollack, and hopefully we can get him to have a few of those.
We don't have much, but we have a bus and we have donuts.
Yes, we do.
And that's all I need.
That's life.
Simple creature comforts.
There you go. Again, Golic and Wingo live from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, for the College Football National Championship game, brought to you by AutoZone. And again, we will get into that throughout the next 3.5 hours, 3 hours. And what's not 3.5 hours? 3 hours and 55 minutes. We'll get into
a lot of time
throughout the day. That's why I'm pacing myself.
There you go.
But it was a crazy, crazy wild card weekend over the weekend of the NFL with the 2 games Saturday and then the 2 games on Sunday. And we'll start with the last game of the weekend, which was an NFC South showdown. And it was the 21st time in the wild card era that a team had a chance to sweep 3 games, 2 in the regular season in their own division and then the playoff game. And for the 14th time in those 21 games, the team that won the first 2 games, the New Orleans Saints, did conclude the sweep and finish it up as they took down Carolina in what looked like a blowout early, but really, thanks to the defense of the Carolina Panthers, made it a game late.
Yeah, made it a game, made it a last possession game for Carolina to try and drive down and win this game. But early on, or really throughout the game, you look at what Carolina tried to do. You know, when you're in the same division, you know, and you're running against the same team twice a year, and then you play them 3 times, you kind of know each other. So you find ways to mix it up a little bit. And the way it got mixed up some yesterday was Carolina with a lot of 5-man pressures, something that New Orleans wasn't expecting at first. And so trying to put pressure, it certainly helped against the run as New Orleans ran the ball 22 times for just 41 yards. Unfortunately, when you try and bring some extra pressure on Drew Brees, he has a chance to hit you hard with that. And he ended up being 11 of 16 on blitzes when that extra pressure came, hitting passes like for 80 yards, 19, 18, 25, 46, 16 yards. So that's the poison you pick with a quarterback like Drew Brees. Okay, you stop the run with Ingram and Kamara that you wanted to do, but man, you get Brees back there, and a guy like Michael Thomas is his favorite receiver now, and his speeds are like Ted Ginn, who catches the 80-yard touchdown pass where he wasn't even the primary receiver, but the way coverage broke, he gets the ball. I mean, that's what happens when you're against a Hall of Famer like Drew Brees.
Well, and this is what we always talked about makes New Orleans so dangerous in this playoff run is on the day where that run game that's had as dynamic a running back duo as we've seen in league history isn't firing on all cylinders because Carolina decides to take that away. You've still got to deal with Drew, and it's the difference between not maybe being a dual threat guy, but being such a mobile guy in the pocket. And even plays where Drew didn't make the play, his ability to escape pressure in the pocket, to sometimes just throw the ball away and live to play another down was really on full display yesterday.
But I think that's what makes this New Orleans Saints team so much more interesting than ones in years past, because if you had talked about Drew Brees putting up the numbers he had, 376 yards, a couple of touchdowns, no interceptions, you're like, man, we got strafed. But that's not the way this team is built. So I really think, it reminds me of when Bill Belichick was the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants in Super Bowl 25. He basically told a very proud defense, look, man, if we're going to have a chance to win this game, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to let Thurman Thomas run for about 150 yards. So we're going to let him run underneath. We're going to take away that K-gun offense of the Buffalo Bills and not let them have big plays in the passing game. And essentially the exact same thing happened in the opposite way for the Carolina Panthers. I'm sure the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks, said to those guys, look, man, we have to sell out to stop Kamara, and we have to sell out to stop Ingram. And if we do that, we believe we can stay in this game long enough to have a chance to have a shot at the end to win it. And that's sort of what they did. They decided the only way we can stay in this game is to let Drew Brees see if he can torch us in the air, because we're going to make sure what has been the bread and butter for that New Orleans Saints offense this entire year, those two-headed monster of Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram didn't beat us.
Yeah, you look at Kamara, 10 rushes, 23 yards, 1 catch for 10, so he had 33 total yards. Ingram, 9 rushes, 22 yards, 1 catch for 13 yards, so he had 35 total yards. So you're right, they weren't the threats that they would like to be. And one of the other biggest differences for New Orleans is when we would say, okay, you have Brees, the offensive side of the ball, outside of the way they're doing it, is a little different. Is actually like more when they won the Super Bowl by having running backs and guys who can catch a running game, I should say. But what have we seen as of late? We've seen Drew Brees in this offense put up 30 points, 31, 35. Unfortunately, we've seen the other team put up 40 or 38. Or 45. And this one, it was 26 because of a good fourth quarter by Carolina and Cam Newton in that offense. But that's been a big difference as well to me, is that New Orleans defense has been able to keep some teams in check.
And Cam Jordan, who continues to have, whether he wins it or not, a Defensive Player of the Year type performance.
My God, he was everywhere yesterday.
Watching him, especially down the stretch, and that's what you want from your big players, is to show up in the moments when you're needed the most. And on that final drive from Carolina, Cam was in that backfield. He was drawing triple teams at certain times. And just in general, throughout the course of the season, when you pair that with a guy like Marshawn Lattimore on the back end that's been such a shot of life into that defensive secondary, it really marries up well for a defense to improve as much as New Orleans has.
Well, I mean, that's the really interesting thing about this team is for the last 3 years, they were the worst off defense in the NFL. Not just like, they were 32nd this year. No, cumulatively in almost every stat imaginable.
Yep.
Through 2015, 2016, and 2017, they were literally the worst defense we'd ever seen. And thanks to the draft where they got the two defensive backs, safety Marcus Williams and Marshawn Lattimore, they have done great. But Cam Jordan was unbelievable on Sunday. As you mentioned, he was everywhere. And there was a big hit late in that game, which led to some people wondering once again, were things followed the way they were supposed to be followed in the NFL? If you didn't see it, Cam spun away from one tackler, and then as he spun away, he just got blasted.
He got smoked, yeah.
That was as good of a hit as the one that Derek Johnson for the Chiefs put on Marcus Mariota.
And a clean hit, by the way. It was
totally clean hit.
hit.
Absolutely.
Right.
But he got blasted, lay on the ground, then got up and was jogging to the sidelines, and as he went to the sidelines, fell down or went down again, and they had to come on the field to address him, and then Derek Anderson came in. And then he was evaluated on the sidelines and didn't go down into the locker room for a concussion evaluation. Now, according to the new updated and improved, we hope, concussion protocol rules, Mike, there are some people wondering, did the Carolina Panthers follow those rules the right way?
This has been an addition since what we've seen go on.
Since the Tom Savage hit,
exactly.
basically, against San Francisco.
Right now, and remember the process. You'd go into the tent on the sideline, and if you didn't pass there, then you'd have to go into the locker room. It wasn't automatically or directly into the locker room. Now, the rule reads, you require a locker room visit with a concussion evaluation for all players demonstrating gross or sustained vertical instability, stumbling, falling to the ground upon trying to stand. So that's, and when you saw Travis Kelce last week when he stumbled like that boxer, you knew, I tweeted, done for the game.
Yep.
New protocol, absolutely positively done for the game. I didn't see any of that with Cam. Cam stayed on it, didn't fall on the ground, was on the ground, stayed on the ground, got helped up, but every quarterback gets helped up. But he did stay down longer. He was trying to say it was something with his eye, some of the rubber, the pellets or whatever were in his eye, but you saw him going off the field, and then he went back down. Now, there's a lot going on with that, and you can explain this as well as me. I know offensively, if it's quarterback or it's a center, because I remember when you first got in against Wake Forest, your junior, I'll let you explain it, your Braxton Cave, who was the center, went down with a foot injury. I said I'd let you explain it, then I'm explaining it.
Yeah, exactly.
You go ahead and explain it.
Shut up, and you continued to start to railroad.
Yeah.
But no, the starting center in that game had gone down on the field, and so while that wasn't by design in general when it comes to a quarterback or a center, two people that are going to be involved in the exchange that begins every play, you want to give the backup time to go over there and either take snaps with the quarterback or receive snaps from the new center. And so that's part of the impetus for where you're always told, when in doubt, just go down so we have that time to start to facilitate that. And heard Jeff Saturday say it the other day, but you saw people motioning for Cam from the sideline to get down. Now, in that moment, that might explain, all right, wasn't vertical instability in that moment, but Trey, as you pointed out when we were talking before the show, by the letter of the law at that point that you set forth as the NFL, he's got to go inside the locker room.
It makes all the sense in the world for them to do that with Cam so they can get Derek Anderson, who, by the way, the backup quarterback for the Panthers, who had been sick with the flu. Yep. And to quote our friend Matt Hasselbeck, who a few years ago for the Colts, it was coming out of the roof and the basement.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
He had really been battling with some issues.
Good morning, everybody.
Enjoy your coffee, everybody.
Yeah.
So that creates an issue. And Cam was asked about the concussion protocol and what went on after the game.
I know it was precautionary concussion protocol things that happened, but it wasn't my head, it was my eye. My helmet had came down low enough over my eyelid and got pressed by the player's stomach, I believe. So I thought maybe somebody had stuck their finger in my eye, but I got the visor, so
and look, that could certainly be the case, but after what we saw, as you mentioned, with the Travis Kelce hit, the Tom Savage hit, right. Which created this new concussion protocol after the hit against San Francisco, it's a smart coaching decision to do what they did, but then it sort of dwarfs and morphs into what we're talking about here.
We talk about unintended consequences.
Yes.
This is something that's been going on with football forever. Again, with especially centers and quarterbacks, is stay down so the other can get ready, just as Mike explained. So you kind of naturally do that. If you had a sideline shot, you would see people pointing to get down, and you saw that's exactly what he did. But then, to your point, Trey, by letter of the law, it says going to the ground. He was up, he was going off, and then he went to the ground. By the letter of the law, you would think, okay, we got to follow that protocol. Right. When I personally think he was doing it for that other reason of saying, okay, I need to go to the ground here to let the backup quarterback go ahead and get ready. So they're going to have to fine-tune this thing. They tried to fine-tune it with this rule here, but now we just saw it. And that's the thing that happens a lot of times. You make a rule, and you don't think of all the variances that can happen. And this is one of them. This is something that happens in football a lot, if you choose to believe that he went down so that the backup could warm up. But this does happen all the time. You stay on the ground so the backup can warm up. But in this case, does the letter of the law say, okay, you guys blew this one, and do they now have to, again, kind of rewrite or revamp this thing?
Well, they just have to enforce it. Like, if you're going to put it out there, if you're the NFL, you've got to enforce it, because perception doesn't discern what we're talking about here. It can't discern. And really, we're not in that moment, so it's hard for us to even say definitively what happened. And so if you're the league and you're looking at this, you've got to enforce this, because you have to give, whether or not, whatever level it is truly inside, you have to give the perception that this is something that matters to you, that matters to the image of the league, because if not, you invite every bit of criticism in a big moment like this by saying the rules don't apply because this is a wild card playoff game.
And exactly, that's sort of what got this whole thing started last year. Remember when it was the rematch of the Super Bowl Week 1, Denver hosting Carolina, and there were some big hits against Cam in that game, and people were like, well, wait a minute, what was going on there? And to your point, our own Ryan Clark yesterday basically said exactly what you just said. Guys, if we're going to have the rules, we got to follow it.
But if we're going to continue talking about player safety, if we're going to talk about the concussion protocol being revamped, when you see a play like this, a guy hit that way and laying on the ground in that manner, that is not a I can't see type of way of going down. When you see him go down and he's got his head down on the ground and he's kneeling in the way that he is, it looks to me to be more serious than me having pellets in my eye. And if we're going to be serious about player safety, that's a situation where he needs to be checked out by independent doctor.
Listen, again, I get it, but if you what, I think they got caught here with what they were doing. If you look at him walking off, jogging off the sideline, the last thing before he goes down to a knee, you see him, his full vision goes to the sideline. And that's what people are pointing to get down, and you see him stop after he looks at the sideline and go down to his knee. So I truly think that's why he went down to his knee. But by the letter of the law and where we are with concussions, that put them in a situation where they should have taken him into the locker room. And listen, it's the last thing you want from a on the field play, because he was 7-13, 156 yards, brought him back with a couple of touchdowns in the fourth quarter to put themselves in position to have one more drive to possibly win the game. But when we're talking about concussions, that has to get thrown out the window in a situation like this. So I'll be very interested if in fact Carolina, the league says, hey, what's going on? And Carolina said, listen, we do what people have been doing for decades here. We told him to get down so the backup quarterback can get ready, and he only had something in his eye. I mean, talk about gray areas. Yeah. I mean, all over the place. So this is going to be interesting where they end up going.
And the more you see the replay, you can see that I think it was his right eye. He was squinting with that. As soon as he went to the sidelines, they did get a towel and put it on that right eye because of those pellets that we talked about. But you're right. At the end of the day, there's a new sheriff in town, for lack of a better term. These rules were basically put in place in December.
Right.
And we want to make sure that if they're put in place in December, they've got to be followed when we start playing playoff games in January. By the way, the end of the Carolina season means that the team is officially up for sale.
Yes, it is.
Because Jerry Richardson.
You guys want to buy it?
Yeah.
You got some money? How much you got?
We're going to sell some donuts.
Yeah.
That's all you, pal. That's all you.
But with that in mind, there are always going to be some good tweets. The front page of the New Orleans Times-Picayune today, the Panthers already have a new owner, the New Orleans Saints.
Oh.
3 times the Saints have taken on, and then they'll move on to take on Minnesota.
Right.
And that was the first Monday night game of the year.
Monday night game, right?
Where they went up to Minnesota, and Sam Bradford just tore them apart.
Mm-hmm.
Had a really good day. So
29-19.
Obviously, a lot has changed for both of those squads.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Trey Wingo and Mike Golic Sr. We have some very progressive people that decided to show up very early with us here. A preponderance of Georgia attire was one might expect as well, Atlanta.
Yep.
But we saw one brave Alabama soul in the crowd over there. Somebody sporting Rocky Top as well. So Tennessee also in the house as they are here early, and they'll be here often and late as the game doesn't start for another 13 and a half hours.
I won't say out loud some of the people that don't have tickets what I told them to do here, but go hide somewhere here all day.
There's a
lot
lot
of
of space. A lot of
space.
great spots
where
I think you could nestle in.
Yeah, we're putting out a lot of snacks, chipmunk some of those snacks, and go seclude yourself somewhere, and then just walk around the concourse during the game. What do you think?
I'm going to say, in light of the extra security we have around here today, probably not a good idea.
Should I not have said that out loud?
Probably not a good idea.
All right, forget what I just said.
Don't just so you know. Don't do that.
Do it. Go on, do it. Seriously.
There are some very very serious people here that will take security very, very serious tonight for a lot of reasons. Again, that's the College National Championship game coming up. We'll get into that throughout the rest of the show. Alabama taking on Georgia. But, of course, Sunday that was Wild Card Weekend, the conclusion of Wild Card Weekend. And we talked about the game between Carolina and New Orleans. The early game on Sunday was Buffalo at Jacksonville. And if you like defenses.
Oh, boy.
Or, to put it another way, if you liked not a lot of offense, this was the game for you.
Well, there's it when you sit there.
I love how you're trying to get through this.
Well, because I'm always the one that has to defend a good defensive battle. Okay. Because when we see these, well, that's where I'm going. That's why I stuttered. Well, I do that anyway. But because you want to sit there and say, yeah, that was it. It was a defensive battle. But, man, I mean, listen, we're going to talk a lot about Blake Bortles, but Tyrod Taylor, he was missing guys as well. I mean, there's good defensive play, and there's plays that offenses should be making that they're not. And that's what was going on. I mean, there were passes missed, and one of the things I've always heard this from big league pitchers all the way on down is, and I think the same applies for quarterbacks, is when you're throwing the ball, don't try and place it. Just throw it. Just throw the ball. Don't try and aim it. And, man, you could tell Blake Bortles was trying to aim it. You could tell he was getting frustrated what was going on. He was just trying to aim the ball where it needed to go, and it wasn't getting there. When it's just throw the ball, don't aim it, it looked bad. So, listen, Jacksonville has a great defense, and we see Buffalo play excellent defense at times as well. So you can't discount the fact that there were two really, really good, one great defense, I think, on the field, and another really good defense on the field. But there were some plays that the quarterbacks were absolutely missing in this game.
Yeah, there were. Now, for context, you mentioned how good is that Jaguars defense, first in DVOA, first in opponent QBR, first in opponent passing yards per game.
Just so real quickly, because that's a really advanced metric stat. Explain to people what DVOA is.
Essentially what that defense does on a given play compared to the league average that a team would do on that given play. So
it's kind of like war.
It's war.
It's
war.
It
is. It's football war.
It's our friends at Football Outsiders that came up with that one.
It's a great stat, but a lot of people are like, what are you talking about?
Oh, my God.
Exactly. Your father and I have an issue with the baseball wins above replacement, this mythical unicorn that would come in and do this.
So that's the same thing
it's basically DVOA is war.
Here's one you can understand. First in defensive scoring, second in sacks, all that good stuff. So, yes, contextually a great defense for this group. But you're right. Listen, I mean, this game felt like it sent offense back 40 or 50 years. It was god-awful.
Actually, our own Louis Riddick tweeted it's setting the passing game back 100 years.
I sure changed it.
To which I responded, I'm not sure you can call what we saw yesterday a passing game. I mean, there were footballs that were in the air, which were supposed to be passes, but I'm not sure they actually could be considered passes. And our own Tim Hasselbeck think the Jags should be worried about Blake Bortles' play going forward because they are continuing.
That was awful offense. There's no question it was awful offense. It was, no, I mean, in all seriousness, it was. And I think it should be a concern for Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And not only was it bad offense, but they were trying to script for success for Blake Bortles. A ton of screen game, bunch of low-risk passes, things that were easy. I understand there was some wind there, but they were not aggressive throws in terms of stuff down the field, things that should have been high degrees of difficulty. He just plain was missing and was bad.
Absolutely.
And that's a problem for them going forward. I think we all understand that. But he had a stretch, weeks 13 through 15, where he was outstanding. Yeah. This was a far departure from that.
Well, that's the problem here. Blake was 12 of 23. Now, look, the amazing thing about Blake, he actually led the team in rushing.
Yeah, he did.
10 carries for 88 yards, and every single great offensive play that they had was really a Blake Bortles run,
right,
more than a pass.
Now, only 3 of those were designed runs.
Yes.
The rest were scrambles.
Well, on one of them, he dropped the center exchange on a shotgun snap, which would have been a screen that would have dirted. Instead, because the screen pass was covered and all the blocks were downfield, he was able to scoot around the left side and pick up, I think, 12 or 13 yards. But to Tim's point, if you watch that game, and if you're watching on ESPN2, you can see the drop snap we just talked about now. There were some easy throws. That would have been 10 to 15-yard completions to wide open receivers. He was 12 of 23 for 87 yards passing. He ran the ball for 88 yards.
And as far as the numbers you just gave for passing, he completed just 2 passes thrown past 5 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. And listen, he's not been good most of the year, but we hung on to those weeks 13, 14, 15, right? Because he looked really, really good. And you thought, okay, can he turn it around? Because that's what this team needs. But you just, I know he ran well, I get it, but imagine, I said it from the beginning of the season, and I'm not going to change, and listen, this is just what I have to do to analyze. I don't think he'll be the quarterback of Jackson. I know they picked up his option, I believe, but I don't think he's going to be the quarterback of Jacksonville, and think if they can get a quarterback that's more competent with the running game they have and the defense they have, I mean, their window is wide open right now, not to just be in the playoffs and advance this year, but for years to come with what they have, with what they've done with the draft of young guys and free agents they've brought in. So that's a position. I know they're going forward. We're talking about the demise of the quarterback position, and they're going to play again next week. They're playing at Pittsburgh, and oh, by the way, October 6th, they beat Pittsburgh 30-9.
They destroyed them.
So, I mean, their season isn't even over yet, but that's what a lot of people are going to point to, and they're going to say, boy, Jacksonville is good. If only they had a really good quarterback.
Yeah, I see all of this getting exposed. It's like if you've got a leaky pipe, you may not notice for any given number of days, but then once that pipe gets flooded, you start to see all the cracks show up, and that's what's going to happen against Pittsburgh this time around. I can't explain away Pittsburgh. I maybe took them lightly, maybe it was just a fluke, but I don't see it, especially getting Antonio Brown back. If he can be healthy and competent, we talked about this with the Saints game where you try and take away one part and make the other part beat you. And with Drew Brees and that Saints receiving core, you could maybe say that Michael Thomas is not quite the elite top-flight receiver yet, although he might argue that.
He's pretty good.
But compared to what the Steelers have in their receiving core, it seems like chump change with a healthy Antonio Brown. And if you're trying to take away one part of that offense, good luck.
Well, look, and that's something that we'll talk about this week going forward. What is the health of Antonio Brown after dealing with that torn calf in the game against the Patriots? We've seen him work out and sort of look pretty well over the last couple of weeks. We still don't know what his health status is going to be. They're hopeful he'll be ready to go for that divisional game this coming weekend. But to your point, Mike, about that 30-9 game, if I'm not mistaken, that was in that stretch where the Steelers lost 2 out of 3 games because week 3 they were in Chicago and they had the mix-up with the national anthem when the former Army Ranger Alejandro Villanueva, the left tackle, went out for the national anthem, and everybody else stayed in the locker room because they didn't want to be a part of it. And then they won in Baltimore, and then they got drummed. So I don't think that Steelers team that we saw week 5 is quite the complete cohesive unit that we've seen now. But it has got to be an issue. I mean, to Tim's point, those were easy throws that Blake Bortles was missing. And as bad as that was, at least they won the game. I mean, if you're the Buffalo Bills, you ended the longest drought, not only in the NFL in terms of playoffs, but of all 4 major sports in North America. So we're including Canadian teams as well, specifically in the NHL and the NBA. You have to be just as upset with what you saw on offense. Look, I get it. Jacksonville's defense is great, and the play Jalen Ramsey made to close out that game is why that cornerback is one of the best young players in football, and he's going to be one of the best young players in football for a long time.
And they have another one on the other side, Boye. I mean, it's amazing.
But if you're the Buffalo Bills, you're like, oh, my gosh, listen, Blake Bortles was basically incompetent, and we didn't have enough on offense on our side to get it
So
done.
let's flip it to that real quick, because we're going to talk about Jacksonville all week as they get ready for that game against Pittsburgh. But Buffalo's season is over. So a question, Mike, I guess out of the gate's going to be, because we already saw him get benched once this year for Peterman, was Tyrod Taylor. Is he going to be the quarterback next year? And as Jeff tweets to us, Bills have a couple of firsts, a couple of seconds. They have cap space. They made the playoffs this year. And if you want to buy into, are the Patriots in some turmoil, which was what's going on, or do we believe that's, to use the term of the year, fake news, and they're going to be just fine? But is Buffalo on the come, making the playoffs what they did, having the picks that they have, but is their quarterback situation stable, or are they going to be looking another direction?
Listen, I think Buffalo's made it pretty clear over the last couple of years that they don't want Tyrod there long term. That's become abundantly clear. Now, do I think he can be a competent NFL quarterback? Absolutely. Do I think Buffalo's got some other things? I mean, they were third to last in the league in sack percentage this year, so he was under pressure a lot. We saw that the game Nate Peterman was in there. When you don't have a guy that can move around and you're giving up pressure the way that they were, you find yourself with an even bigger laundry list of problems. So I don't think all of the problems with the pass game with the offense are Tyrod's fault, but I also don't think that matters when you see the way this team has dealt with him. He's probably going to be somewhere else.
Yeah, Golic and Wingo here on the road with you in Atlanta for the national championship game in college football tonight. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests will join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We'll be here all morning on the road at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, getting you ready for the national championship game tonight between Alabama and Georgia, which will be on ESPN, ESPN Radio, and the ESPN app. One last thing about the Buffalo Bills, the thing that may have summed up their offense or lack thereof in that game, they had a 1st and goal at the 1 and settled for a field goal.
What did they throw on that first play?
That was OPI,
ridiculous.
offensive pass interference to Kelvin Benjamin. That set them back. Then they got a sack. I think they had to settle for like a 40-yard field goal after 1st and goal on the 1. So, look, good news for Buffalo. You feel like they may have turned the corner and they got things going. But if they're going to be competitive in that division long term, they have got to figure out how to get more offense.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
What a day, what a show, what a time.
I tell you what, a great sports night last night. No doubt about it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Booger McFarland is here with us. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests will join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Again, we are here getting you set for what should be a really entertaining game later on tonight between Alabama and Georgia.
I agree. And you know what? Let's have the discussion at least for a minute. It was a cool thing with Central Florida. Yeah. Okay, I get it. But let's be done with that, okay? This is a national championship game tonight. The winner of tonight's game is the national champion. UCF had a great year. I hope we get to a system where a team like UCF can get a shot in the playoffs, maybe when it goes to 8. I know they had the parade. I know they printed up the T-shirts. I know the coaches are really happy they got their national title bonuses. All very cool, but they're not the national champs. They had an undefeated year. They had a great year, but it's time to move past that, and let's get to the national championship.
Here's the thing I said about Central Florida. If you're them, allow us to talk about you. Don't you go out and start patting your own self on the back. Allow other people to say that you're good.
And they are good. And they had a good year. And I get it to a point of what they're doing, saying, hey, we don't have a chance to get there, so we're going to claim this. And I get it, but let's move on to the game.
And we will. Yeah. I'll just put a bow on this to Booger, your point. You're right. Let us talk about it, but because they're doing it, that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this.
Exactly.
Because of the parade, because of the bonuses and all that stuff. Again, we'll get into that and more of the college championship game a little bit later on, but obviously not only did you play at LSU, you know what it takes to win a Super Bowl. You did it twice. Playoffs are here, wild card weekend. I want to start with the game between the Titans and the Bills with you, because as a defensive player, and you may have won Twitter yesterday with the game between the Bills and the Jags. What's it like knowing that your defense, and Mike, you did this too when you were with the Eagles, and you had that incredible defense, and sometimes that offense, despite all the weapons, just didn't quite click. What's it like when you see that offense go out time and time again, 3 and out. 3 and out, 4 plays and out, 6 plays and a punt, three plays and minus 6 yards. And you are doing everything in your power to keep the opposing offense from going anywhere, and your offense is stuck in neutral.
I mean, there's nothing you can do. My very first game in the NFL, we played the New York Giants. And
when you were at Tampa Bay?
When I was in Tampa Bay. My quarterback was Trent Dilfer. Love Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer was just not a good quarterback. And we held the New York Giants to 4 first downs, 108 yards total offense. 4 first downs. And we lost 17-13. Trent Dilfer threw a pick 6. He fumbled one that set up another touchdown, and he was going out of bounds. He planted his foot and jumped back in bounds to throw an interception. So that was my indoctrination into the NFL. And when you walk off the field and your quarterback is standing there and he's had a day like that, you just look at him like, bro, seriously? Really? Is that what you're going to do to us today?
During the game, Booger had this to say on Twitter.
It was great.
Booger's tweet was, Blake Bortles is terrible. The type of terrible that will make a defense look at him with the side eye as he walks back to the bench. Now, I can confirm that happened. It happened to us in Philly. The year we lost Randall and our defense, we thought that was our year, 91. We thought,
won against the Packers.
Week 1, Bryce Paup caught him in the side of the knee, and that was it. And we went through court. It took Pat Ryan off the construction site. Brad Gable, had some
Baylor's own Brad Gable.
A lot of different players at quarterback, and it wasn't so much the quarterback because they were put in tough positions. It was the offense, the defense. You kind of get that as the offense is running off and the defense is running on. You're kind of looking at them like, come on, give us something. Let us finish a half a cup of Gatorade before we got to go back on the field. And you in this situation, ours was different. It was a lot of injuries involved. This is a tough situation because, Booger, I had said at the beginning of the season, I don't see Jacksonville, Blake Bortles being their quarterback after this year, but they picked up the fifth-year option.
Yeah.
And I know he had a good week 13, 14, 15, but this team's window was wide open with the running game, the defense that they have right now. I just can't see it. And we're talking about a team that's still alive in the playoffs.
You know what's so amazing is they went into Pittsburgh and beat Pittsburgh.
Yep.
But
30-9, they handled them.
But based on what we saw from Blake Bortles, I don't think anybody up here is going to give them a chance against Pittsburgh this week. Because when you go into the postseason, the mindset changes. Every coach is going to take what you do best, which is their running game and their defensive speed, rushing the passer, and they're not going to allow you to do that. I guarantee you Mike Tomlin is not going to allow that front four to dominate him. They're not going to allow Fournette to go off again and have a 90-yard touchdown run. And so Blake Bortles is going to have to win this game. If they're going to play a 9 or 10-man front, put it on him. And he looked like he was unsure of how to throw the ball yesterday. That was the disappointing part. He's a guy that's been in this league a while. You can't hit a simple slant route. You can't hit a simple check down, and the receivers are looking at you like, hey, man, you're the same guy that threw for over 4,000 yards a few years ago. We had 2,000-yard receivers. Where is that guy at? He has no confidence, and somehow they have to figure out a way to get some confidence into him as they go into Pittsburgh, or it will be a long afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, he was guiding the ball. You said it best. He wasn't trying.
He was aiming it. He wasn't
He wasn't trusting it all. He wasn't it's like a golf swing, which we'll get into later, by the way. You just got to trust it and let it go. But here's the deal, which is so interesting with him. Like you said, Mike, they're still alive.
Yeah, they are.
They're still in this thing. So take me inside that Jacksonville locker room because they know they've got a great defense. Mm-hmm. They know they've gone to Pittsburgh and kicked the Steelers' butts already in Week 5. Now, granted, it was a different Steelers team that was going through a lot at the time, and they've come together since then. But you know you've been there, done that with this team, and you know the defense is good enough to play with anybody. What do you say or how do you deal with the issues that you're dealing with on the offensive side right now to get yourself ready to play for this game?
Well, the first thing you do, and Booger and I were both defensive guys, I know what's going on in that defensive locker room. When they're talking amongst themselves, hey, gang, don't expect 30 like the last time we played the Steelers. 30 ain't happening. Let's go. If it happens, great, but it ain't happening. We have to keep our team in this game. We may have to win this game for our team with a turnover. We have to keep this score low. Can't expect our offense to put up 30 like they did before. That's what's going on the defensive side, where you've been on a great defense, I have, where you say, you know what, we have the ability to go out and really dictate in this game. The offensive side, listen, at this point, you can't get cute. At this point, you just have to take what you do best and do it. You know, and Blake Bortles, I don't know what you do to him. Haven't seen a passing therapist. I don't, because he did pass well in weeks 13, 14, 15. It's not like he never did it. He just doesn't have the consistency to do it. So I don't really know, Booger, if you change a whole lot. You're going with your same game plan and just expect this time you can't not throw a short slant
correct.
Because he didn't hit it this past week. You got to still run the plays and have him make the throw.
I'll never forget John Gruden came into Tampa and he said, you guys have been historically great on defense. Here's the one thing you hadn't done. You hadn't scored on defense. He said, if you guys want a Super Bowl championship, stop blaming the offense, score on defense. We scored 9 touchdowns that year on defense, and we won the Super Bowl. Jacksonville has a defense that they have a front four that can dominate the game. Anytime you have 4 guys, and Golic, you understand this, Trey, 4 guys can make up for a plethora of sins on the entire team.
Without question.
And if Jacksonville's defense says, you know what, guys, Blake Bortles is going through a slump. I know he's going to make a play here and there, but we have to make sure that this game is close in the fourth quarter where when he does make a play, we can win the game. And that's what the defense has to do, because the one thing you cannot do, you cannot walk around the facility like, man, we got no shot. And look at Blake Bortles, because as a quarterback, he feels all that. He feels everything like, man, these guys are looking at me and treating me differently. You want to give your quarterback confidence even if you have none in him. There was a point in time where we looked at Trent Dilfer like, bruh, we need a new quarterback. But we couldn't tell him that because he was still a part of our team. They have to do the same thing in Jacksonville this week.
And to Trent's undying credit, who worked with us for a lot of years, he owns the fact that he was terrible for a lot of years.
I love Trent. He knows that.
He knows it, too. But just so people, when you go back to that 30-9 game in which the Jags won, this was the line from Blake Bortles in that game. He was 8 of 14 for 95 yards.
Yeah.
Okay? Leonard Fournette had 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's how they won that game. And Ben in that game was god-awful. He was 33 of 55 for 312 yards, no touchdowns, 5 interceptions.
Yeah.
So do we think those 2 things are going to happen again? I don't think so. Right? I don't think you're going to see Ben toss 5 with no interceptions.
No. I don't think that'd be a little bit of redemption for him. You expect that. We'll see how Antonio Brown is from this whole situation. But, they need Le'Veon Bell, I think, will be huge in this. When you get a big-time pass rush, it's so easy to dump the ball off to a guy like Le'Veon Bell and say, okay, you go do your thing. That's our way of getting rid of the ball quickly.
Yeah, Golic and Wingo live from Mercedes-Benz Stadium here in Atlanta, site of the College Football National Championship game, which is presented by Progressive Insurance. Again, you can see it on ESPN. You can listen to it on the ESPN radio or the ESPN app. We are here getting people ready for the game between Alabama and Georgia, but we'll get to that a little bit later. The other game on Sunday, Booger, was the game between the Saints and the Panthers. What really impressed me most about New Orleans this year is the way they've won games, and I thought it was very fitting how they closed that game out. It was a sack on defense because the Saints defense historically 2014, 2015, and 2016 was literally the worst.
Yeah.
Not only, each year, cumulatively the worst in terms of everything across the board. And to see what they've done with that unit, what Dennis Allen, the former head coach of the Raiders, to see what he's been able to do on that defensive unit with 2 rookies in that defensive backfield, Marshawn Lattimore and Marcus Williams, has been absolutely amazing.
You got to give Sean Payton a lot of credit because he changed his philosophy and his style. Sean Payton is a guy who's never met a pass he didn't like. Okay, he wanted to beat you with an offensive philosophy that was going to throw the football. He said, you know what, that really hasn't worked all except one year, the year we won the Super Bowl, and even that year they led the NFL in turnovers, Trey. So they changed everything up. We're going to play defense and we're going to run the football. We got this young rookie named Alvin Kamara. We're going to feature him. We're going to get back to Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram has been a very good back in this league for a long time. Evidently, sometimes the Saints have forgotten about that.
Yep.
They've gotten back to running the football, featuring their best weapons, and playing defense. And what that allows you to do is be a much more physical football team. Football is still a physical sport, man. You can run out around here and play basketball on grass. It looks pretty, but when the weather turns in December, you got to be able to run the football, and you better be able to play defense. And the Saints now have a team that can travel. They're going to get tested on the road this week against a physical defense. They're going to have to run the football, but I love the change in philosophy from Sean Payton. That has been the key to their turnaround this season.
And that's the thing. If you try and take something away from them, like Carolina did take away their running attack. Those 2 didn't get off at all, and they only had 1 catch each. But you got Drew Brees.
A Hall of Fame quarterback.
So you get 5-man pressures, just what Sean Payton said after the game. Listen, they gave us a lot of 5-man looks. That's something that was a little different, single safety. And, so we had to find a way to take advantage of it. Left the outside, a little open to us, except the long pass to Ginn, which he wasn't even the main receiver in that one. So Carolina did take away part of their game plan. But again, it's to Drew Brees.
You know what I thought about watching Carolina is I thought about Buddy Ryan's defense when they would reduce the nose and get 5 one-on-ones and say, you know what, we're going to make sure that we get one-on-one matchups in the pass, and we're going to define the running lanes. We're going to trample the run on the way to the quarterback. I thought about you guys as I was watching that defense yesterday.
Yeah, and they did a good job against the run, but against the pass, the pressures, Drew Brees picked him apart.
Yeah.
I mean, he was big time against the 5-man pressures, but that's what you do. You can't stop everything, so you try and stop one thing, which they did of the Kamara and Ingram trains, which were running, and then Carolina made a nice run in the fourth quarter. You know, with a couple of touchdowns, the great option route run by McCaffrey. What a stab outside to get the backer. I mean, what a mismatch anyway. And he takes the inside route and takes it to the house. I mean, put him in position there for the end of the game on that last drive.
Yeah, one last thing that isn't really discussed enough about the Saints offense and the balance that you were talking about they had in 2009 when they beat the Colts in that Super Bowl. They're the first team in 25 years to have 2 running backs and a wide receiver in Michael Thomas, all with over 1,200 yards from scrimmage. Yeah. So you talk about different ways they can attack.
Yes.
Hasn't happened that way in 25 years. Something happened Saturday that rarely happens, by the way. The Titans overcame an 18-point halftime deficit against Kansas City. And this is significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, that's only the 4th time in modern NFL history. And when I say modern NFL history, it goes back to 1933. My parents are 82. They were born in 1935.
Wow.
Okay, so this predates my parents being born. Only 4 times in NFL postseason history have we had a team come back from being 18 points or more down at the half to win a playoff game. 4 times. Mm-hmm. Andy Reid has had it happen to him twice.
Yes.
Twice.
Yes.
The Colts playoff game a couple of years ago in Indianapolis, and then Saturday against the Tennessee Titans. And it makes you wonder, what are we going to see different in Kansas City next year? Will it be, even though it was not Alex Smith's fault, there were drops, there were all kinds of issues.
Right.
There were huge issues with the play calling in that game. Kareem Hunt had 6 carries in the first quarter, 5 over the rest of the 3 quarters, when you had the lead and Travis Kelce was out with the concussion. So there are all kinds of issues. But considering the collapse that we saw once again in Kansas City, do you think there'll be big changes there next year?
No, and I think the biggest change is going to be going from Smith to Patrick Mahomes. And
that would be a big change.
Well, it's not going to be a big change in philosophy. They're going to Mahomes so they can throw the football more because of his arm. And so from Andy Reid's standpoint, he wants to throw the football. And we just gave Sean Payton a lot of credit for changing his philosophy and saying, you know what, I'm going to win with defense and running game. Andy Reid has yet to do that. Andy Reid, the fact that Andy Reid did not run the football with the guy that's leading the NFL in rushing, to me, speaks a lot on Andy Reid. Because Andy Reid is a little bit about Andy Reid. It's about my offense. It's about how I can come up with different formations and show you just how neat I am from an offensive genius standpoint. And that's totally his fault. And you talk about those 2 collapses, go back and look at them. You got to run the football, man. When you get a lead and you got a guy that can pound a defense, why are you throwing the football with an 18-point lead? And yes, there's going to be the conspiracy theorists that say, yeah, you got to stay aggressive. You can stay aggressive while still running the ball and giving Kareem some carries.
I am a big Andy Reid fan, always have been, but I mean, there's no doubt there's obvious questions as to what you're doing. You know, you look at the New Orleans game. You know, a game that they're winning too and battling in, and their running game isn't working. They still ran it 22 times. They still, you keep running the ball 22 times for 41 yards. Here you have a lead, as you mentioned, with the leading rusher. Kareem Hunt has 1,327 yards. He led the way in the regular season, and you give it to him 11 times. Yeah. Look at all you had to do, it's not like you had to go back in time. You had to go back to the beginning of the year, the first 5 games.
Exactly.
When they had Kareem Hunt involved in running the ball and in catching the ball. And you're 5-0, and Alex Smith is going down the field, short passes, longer passes. And it's like, where was that? How do you have that lead and not just run? I was stunned at that.
And here's the thing that's really going to be bizarre, because it probably will be Patrick Mahomes next year. Alex Smith had the best season of his career. Alex Smith, 67.5 completion percentage. The only time he was better than that was when he only played 10 games in San Francisco in 2012. He had 4,000 passing yards, the most in his career. 26 touchdown passes, the most in his career, against only 5 interceptions, the best ratio of his career. So in all likelihood, it is going to be a change at quarterback, not a change at coaching staff. And it's hard to look at Alex Smith and say, yeah, he was the problem.
Perception reality, though, Trey. Yeah. Because perception-wise, what have we always thought about Alex Smith? He's a check-down guy. He doesn't push the football down the field.
They had big plays this year.
So that's the reason. But perception reality is the reason, in my opinion, they're going to go to Patrick Mahomes. Bigger arm, a little bit more athletic, some say, can make those big throws on the run. So they're going to go and say, you know what, we're going to change our philosophy. We want the big plays. We have Tyreek Hill. We have some of these other weapons, DeAndre Thomas. We want to make sure that we can push the football down the field, and they think Patrick Mahomes can do that.
I am amazed. There is going to be a quarterback available who threw for over 4,000 yards.
It's ridiculous.
It's almost 68% completion, threw 26 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And you're going to choose to go in another. I personally don't understand
would kill for that right now.
How many teams would?
They would kill for that.
How many teams would? I'm absolutely amazed at that. And listen. Let's give credit to Tennessee.
Yep.
Now, with Derrick Henry, I remember before the game everyone saying, oh, Derrick finally going to get to do his thing. And I said, I wasn't sure because they were used to the two-back system. Mm-hmm. Last week when DeMarco Murray was out and he only ran for like 50-some yards. Right. It was against Jacksonville, though, so it was a very tough defense. But he's a guy that gets going, especially late in games. And, man, he turned it up, no doubt about it. So you have to give them credit on that side.
Yeah, Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, live from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta for the National Championship game. We'll get into that a little bit later. But more on this idea of what happened, because I talked about it only happened 4 times, the 18-point deficit at the half, come back and win. It actually happened in back-to-back playoff games because it was a Super Bowl last year where the Falcons, sorry guys, our fans here are very upset with me, but I'm about to spin this in a positive way for you, so bear with me. Egg Jr.'s car, not mine, okay? Here's the deal. What we saw Saturday night from the Falcons, I think, was the Falcons finally learning their lesson. Because if the Falcons had just run the dadgum football in the second half against the Patriots, they would have been Super Bowl champions. And what did they do in a low-scoring game?
Ran it 39
Saturday?
times.
That's exactly right. In a very tight game, they stayed committed to the run. They ran it 39 times. And that, more than anything else, to me, is why they are moving on to the postseason, because they didn't abandon something that has been very good to them.
I would agree with that. I mean, listen, Atlanta is still not the juggernaut offense we saw last year, but they're moving on. I like their defense. We know how Dan Quinn builds that defense. A little more undersized and speed and getting after the passer. Do you think the Rams were a little like, haven't been here in a while, kind of, hey, okay, we're here, and that was an odd game out of them. You have to give Atlanta credit for what they did, but for a team that leads the league in scoring to put up just 13 points, they just didn't early turnovers, which is going to. So here we are, we got our chance. Turnover, boom. I mean, it just really seemed to go against them, and Atlanta took advantage of it.
Rams are a big play offense, and when you take the big play away from an offense like that, they get a little impatient. And if you watch Atlanta, they played a little bit of man-to-man, but they dropped back in that zone coverage. They made them throw everything underneath. We're going to rally up, and we're going to tackle. And we're not going to allow you those 4, 3, 6-play drives. We're going to make you go 10, 12 plays down the field, and what happens is they test the patience. Not necessarily of the players, but of the play caller. The guy that's calling the plays, you have to be committed to matriculating the ball down the field. And
you
not
went
just
full Hank Stram on us, matriculate down the field.
You got to be willing to commit to that. Yeah. You can't just say, I'm going to drop back and dial up 80-yard touchdowns every time.
And here's why this is really interesting for Atlanta. They're going on the road this weekend. They'll play Philadelphia, who's the number 1 seed, although they don't feel like a number 1 seed anymore because of the injury to Carson Wentz. They're actually favored in that game. Yeah. And to your point about the defense, including the playoff game against the Rams, who were the number 1 scoring team in the NFL in the regular season. The last 6 games, the Falcons' defense played the Rams, the Vikings, good offense, Panthers, good offense, playoff team, the Saints twice, a very good offense, and the Bucs. They gave up an average of 16.3 points per game over those last 6 games.
That's a real happy head coach that slants to the defensive side, and Dan Quinn. He's very, very happy about that.
I'm telling you, you Falcons fans over there wearing the Georgia, feel good about that. Okay, look at the last 2 years. It was the Broncos' number 1 defense that won the Super Bowl. Yeah. And you won't feel good about this, but it was the Patriots who had the number 1 point-scoring defense. Right. They go with the fewest points per game. That defense is why the Falcons are still in the playoffs and in the playoffs alone. It's not the offense. It has been the defense that has carried them down the stretch.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
It was all sort of one big, giant Jell-O mold. It's very interesting where that went.
Todd McShay, by the way, looking very GQ. I must admire you there.
Golic would appreciate it.
Looks very nice.
What do we got there? It's like a pseudo sweater with buttons and.
But it's kind of form-fitting, you know.
If you have the form, it can't be fit.
Get the fit.
Losing the form.
We'll work on that. Look, I was about to say your time would slow down after college football, but no, then we're into all 7,000 mock drafts that you'll have to get into leading up to the draft.
Favorite.
Which will be, by the way, in Dallas this year. We're really excited about that. So make sure you come down and join us if you're going to be in the Dallas area in April. And if you're going to be here tonight, make sure you're part of the festivities here. You can see the National Championship game on ESPN. You can listen to it on ESPN Radio or also listen to it on the ESPN app. It's time for the Straight Talk now, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. We'll get into the game tonight and what we may see playoff-wise or in terms of potential draftees a little bit later. But since we had the wild card weekend here, we thought we'd get your thoughts first and foremost on what we saw Sunday. And my goodness, maybe the Buffalo Bills and Jacksonville Jaguars may be thinking about a quarterback in the draft after what we saw.
Yes. Blake Bortles, he went through that stretch where you thought maybe he finally
3 games
turned
where he
the
was
corner.
awesome.
Maybe he finally turned the corner, and then there were some throws yesterday where it almost seems like he's still struggling with his delivery. And at this point in his NFL career, you have to have it figured out. And it's surprising to see on just some simple throws that he's missing. Obviously, he was able to use his mobility. They found a way to win, and you're sitting here now in the divisional round. And when you get to the divisional round, you'd like to think that you don't have a quarterback issue moving forward unless your quarterback's getting ready to retire. But they clearly do. And this team is so good just about everywhere else. I mean, a championship-level defense, an offensive line that's played okay, running back, they've got some decent receivers. They are a quarterback away from being one of the elite teams in the NFL.
You know, we look at the top of the draft and teams that need quarterbacks yet again, but in your mind, I think it's going to be a rough one for you and Mel because there are so many quarterbacks, veterans that are going to be available that do these teams that you think may draft at the top end up getting a quarterback before the draft, which really then change. Now you've got your quarterback, you still have a top pick, so you're looking to get out of there, and another team jumping up for these quarterbacks. You know, we keep talking about 4, maybe 5 quarterbacks in the first round, but with all the veteran quarterback movement, how much could that change?
Well, it'll shake everything up, obviously, depending on which quarterbacks move. And, you know, if you're talking about an Eli, that's you still are probably going to be in the market for a quarterback to develop in the future, depending on what the situation is. But to me, there are 2 quarterbacks at the top, Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen. Darnold from USC and Rosen from UCLA. Then there's a little bit of a drop-off when you get to Josh Allen from Wyoming, who has
struggled this year.
The most physical talent of all of these guys.
Yes.
But he's the least developed at this point of these quarterbacks. And then Baker Mayfield, who some people are going to love. The intangibles are I think, outstanding from a football standpoint. Yes, he's had some incidents, but from a leadership and the work ethic and the drive and just what he brings to a football team, he has some of that it that you look for that very few quarterbacks have. And I know he didn't play great at times against Georgia. He's got some size limitations, and you saw he got beat up a little bit in that game. And as he took more hits, you started to see him become less and less effective to the point where the coaching staff basically took the ball out of his hand in overtime, which was really surprising to see. But his body of work this year was outstanding. He improved so much as a pocket passer, and I think he still projects somewhere in that late first, early second round range.
So if you have the money to do it, and you look up at the Browns, and if they want to take and if you're running the Browns, which the way it's going, you may be someday, the way they change that.
That was actually very funny.
With quarterbacks that are available, Eli's up there in age, even Alex Smith up there in age. Kirk Cousins is 29. Would you, if you were the Cleveland Browns, sign a guy like that, even though it's going to be monster money, or take one of these quarterbacks? I know it's a lot depending on the grade. Take one of these quarterbacks in the draft. Which route would you go?
Well, first of all, I would have given away anything, and I said it at the time, to get Jimmy Garoppolo. I would have done anything possible. I know they tried, but I would have.
And all it took was a second-round pick.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have given away a lot more than you normally would have seen to do it, just because I thought Garoppolo had learned under the best and it has the talent to be a really good starting quarterback, and we'll see how it works in San Francisco. Good start he's off to. I would take Sam Darnold over Kirk Cousins because I think Cousins, while he can be very effective, I think he has to have a great supporting cast, whereas Darnold, I think, can wind up being one of those quarterbacks that can carry a football team.
And you're playing the down the road on
exactly.
Darnold, right?
And we're still developing this roster. If I'm the Browns, I've got the 1 pick and I think the 6 pick, 5 pick.
They have a ton of picks.
2 in the top 10 and a whole bunch in the top 150.
They have 1 and 4.
They have 1 and 4. So, to me, now we can get Darnold, and then we can still get an impact player at number 4, one of the 4 best players in the entire draft, and then move on from there and continue to develop what is a young roster. Now, they've made a lot of mistakes, and they're in this position because of it over the last few drafts.
Bottom line is you take one of these draftable quarterbacks over Kirk Cousins.
Over Cousins, yes.
Okay.
But it may not be Cousins. I mean, you look at there's a lot of quarterbacks.
No, I was just going more on the age because Alex Smith in his 30s, Eli obviously in his 30s. I'm trying to think of the other quarterbacks that a franchise-type quarterback money that's going to go out there, which Cousins would cost you if you would take that over one of the draftable guys.
This may be the most unbelievable quarterback market and free agency we've ever seen.
Yes.
And I think what happens in March when the league year begins will dictate a lot of what happens in the draft. By the way, something that's really interesting is Adam Schefter put this out on his Twitter feed for the upcoming weekend of the division round. The discrepancy in playoff experience between the starting quarterbacks in these games. Marcus Mariota, 1 playoff start. Tom Brady, 34. Blake Bortles, 1. Ben Roethlisberger, 20. Matt Ryan, 9. Nick Foles, 1. Drew Brees, 12. Case Keenum, 0.
Wow.
So if you're looking for, if you believe experience matters, I think you know where you're going on all these divisional round matchups in the NFL. As Golic and Wingo are here with you in Atlanta for the national championship game. Todd McShay is with us, and there's a lot to get into with him, and you're going to be a regular on this show and on NFL Live and all the free agency shows leading up to the new year and the draft coming up at the end of April in Dallas. But just on this field tonight, I think this is fascinating. You and I were talking about this before we went on the air with you here. How many first-round picks do you think we'll see on the field tonight in the national championship game between Alabama and Georgia?
I think 4 to 5. I mean, when you look at it, Minka Fitzpatrick is the highest-rated player in this game.
Cornerback for Alabama,
he's a defensive back, safety corner. He can play a little bit of both. We've got him at number 4 overall in the class. Then behind that, you've got Calvin Ridley, who's the top wide receiver for Alabama, and Rodney Harrison is a safety for Alabama. It's kind of late first, early second round range. Rashaan Evans is the same, an inside linebacker. He's really had a great year stepping up. For Georgia, Roquan Smith has emerged as probably the best off-the-line linebacker.
Was he good.
The second half, that first half, I was a little quiet. Second half, man, did he make his presence felt.
I was standing on the end zone watching him and just watching his eyes, how quickly he was getting to a play, how patient he was, and then that one time the goal line stand that they had when he came up and when he shot his hips through.
Yeah, he did.
Because he's a 225, 230
For those that may not know, he was a Butkus Award winner as a top linebacker in the country.
Yeah, he just stoned that running back. So he was impressive. He was all over the field. Lorenzo Carter is probably in that second round range. But the 2 running backs, it's interesting because Nick Chubb is kind of the bell cow, if you will, and gets all the attention. Sony Michel, some people in the league think might be a better NFL player.
The way the league's playing right now, swing him the ball out of the backfield.
Looks a lot like Alvin Kamara and the things you were able to do with him with the Saints, right?
Exactly. So with those 2 backs are probably somewhere in the second round range. And then you've got Swift, the DeAndre Swift, who's the third running back, who's just a freshman, who might wind up being better than both of these guys when it's all said and done. So they are absolutely loaded at the running back position, as Georgia traditionally has been in the past.
Okay, so you think 4, maybe 5 first-rounders.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I asked you how many total, because look, Russell Wilson was a third-rounder. I mean, you see every year, second, third, fourth. Alvin Kamara was a third-rounder, I believe, or a second-rounder. You see all these guys that aren't taken in the first round that have exceptional NFL careers. Total number of draft picks between Alabama and Georgia in the 2018 draft in Dallas. How many?
I've got right now 24 players.
That's insane.
In the top 225,
insane.
And there's around 236 draft picks. So that's about right. Now, could give or take a few, but that's as much as I can remember going back to national championship games. Usually one team has a lot more than the other, and it's not the case. Alabama clearly is a little bit more top-loaded this year, but not by much when you look at the first 2 rounds. We also have 4 for Georgia in the top 100, 8 for Alabama in the top 100. That's just the first 3 rounds. So you're talking 12 guys right there in the first 3 rounds that are going to be playing in this game. And remember, too, Georgia's kind of just starting this thing.
Yeah. Right.
They had 1 draft pick a year ago. They've had 11 draft picks in the last 3 years compared to Bama had 10 last year alone. It was the most in the Nick Saban era. And I mean, that to me is what's most interesting about Georgia, is that they're just building it up and the talent is below and kind of climbing each and every year. Whereas Bama, I don't know how they do it. I honestly don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 10 a year ago, and they're right back here in the national championship game.
It's the only number I
seven in the first. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
seven in the first 3 rounds, or two rounds.
That's the thing with them. It's not the total draft; it's a monster number, but it's the quality players up in the first couple rounds. Last time I heard a number that, correct me if I'm wrong, was the Fiesta Bowl a couple of years ago. Ohio State, Notre Dame, was there 19?
Yes.
You corrected me when I said that in the air, but I'm glad you did. That there were 19 drafted players from both teams in that one in a Fiesta Bowl. Obviously, was not a title game, but
and Ohio State had all 12 of theirs were in the first 4 rounds.
It's incredible.
It was a crazy class.
Well, I mean, just that number alone, you have 2 sets of starters. You have a starting unit on offense and defense, 22, and then 2 subs. Yeah. That'll be drafted out of what we're seeing here. Golic and Wingo on the road, live from Mercedes-Benz Stadium here in Atlanta for the College Football Playoff National Championship, which is presented by Progressive Insurance. And that game will play out tonight behind us. Todd McShay with us talking about what we have on the field here, not only in terms of potential in the NFL, but great, outstanding college football, which is what you do all season long during the year when you're traveling with your boys Steve Levy and Greasy, and you guys do a great job on the radio and everything else you do for us. And one of the things I don't think has been discussed enough, we talked about it a little bit with Booger last segment, is what Georgia's gotten from this freshman quarterback. Now, look, he's years away from being drafted, but when you see what he's been able to do in pressure situations, that first game you talked about, Golic, when he went up to Notre Dame and came away with a win there, and it seems like he's been on a graph pointing forward ever since then. What do you think his potential can be going forward?
Well, first of all, I think this coaching staff, Chaney, the offensive coordinator from Georgia, they've done a great job, and they had the ability to with their offensive line that finally is playing to a high level this year, and I think is the biggest difference between this Georgia team this year and years past. And they've not forced it on the quarterback early on. That was the whole thing. They run the ball. He's thrown the ball 9 times, 13 times, 15 times. But as the season progressed, they started to put more and more on him. I thought in the SEC championship game he played really well. Really well. I thought that in the Rose Bowl, he kind of took it over. And
he did. He absolutely did.
I remember standing probably 30 yards behind him as the crowd's roaring. It's late in the game. They need to drive. They're moving. They've got to go the full field. And he's in there calling out the mic. There was a mistake on the mic. He's changing the mic. The clock's ticking down from 7, 6, 5. He kills a play, gets into a new play, and gets the ball out at 1. I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's a true freshman in the Rose Bowl. The sun just set. Everything's on the line. You're going up against Baker Mayfield, the Heisman Trophy winner, and you have the onions, if you will, to be checking, killing.
Intestinal fortitude.
Thank you.
Yes.
To go through that whole process as you're under 10 seconds left on the play clock. That showed me a lot. He also hung in the pocket a lot and trusted his protection, which a lot of young quarterbacks don't do and wind up getting themselves in trouble. So he's got enough arm talent. We'll evaluate him as he continues to develop. But he has what you look for from the mental side and the ability to handle pressure that all the great ones seem to have.
So let's dive into that for a second and college football for a second and how it's all working. Because let's remember, Jacob Fromm was not the starting quarterback.
No.
It was not the starting. It was Eason, right? Who was the starting quarterback?
Jacob Eason.
Jacob Eason was the starting quarterback, and he got hurt. Eason was like one of the, I think, top 16, or he was a highly rated kid. He comes in, so he gets hurt. Fromm takes over. Now they've signed the top quarterback prospect in the country.
I know.
And first of all,
I expect Eason to transfer.
Well, see, that's what I want to ask you. In this day and age, how many of those quarterbacks, because Fromm has to play at least 2 more years before he's eligible to go to the draft. So maybe this kid comes in, the freshman, we know he's going to redshirt 1 year, and then so how many of these quarterbacks Fromm will be, but stay there in this day and age of a guy saying, I'm not going to play here, I need to get somewhere else where I can play. I agree, Eason's going to be gone, and then I was kind of amazed the top prospect came here knowing that Fromm was a true freshman.
Yeah, I was too, to be completely honest with you.
Well, that's just a good job by Kirby Smart.
It's a great job.
That's just selling the program right there.
Right, and that, hey, listen, maybe Fromm will be gone in 2 years, and worst case, it's 3 more years. You redshirt for 1, and then you get 2 years starting at Georgia, and history shows what we've done in terms of program-wise in Alabama, and you're going to win a lot of games, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I would be interested to see kind of what the mentality is of the true freshman that just signed, or the incoming freshman. Now that Fromm kind of was, he's protecting the ball, he's caretaking. They can do better. They can get. after these last two games, how do you pry this starting job away from him? You don't.
No.
Exactly.
It's his job, right? It's absolutely his job.
This is almost reminiscent of what we had a few years ago at Texas Tech when Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, and Davis Webb were all in that quarterback room. Davis Webb came over from Cal, I think, and because Jared Goff was going to be the starter there, and Baker obviously was a walk-on, then eventually transferred to Oklahoma. That worked out well for him.
It did,
and it certainly worked out well for Patrick Mahomes, as he looks like he is going to be the future in Kansas City. Golic and Wingo here with you. We are in Atlanta for the national championship game. Todd McShay is with us. Todd, you covered college football all season long. We talk a lot about the success that Nick Saban always seems to have against his former assistants. Yep. He's 11-0 against him. But it feels like, whether it will translate into that first win or not, it feels like it is different with this assistant in Kirby Smart because he was with Saban maybe the longest, and he knows him better, and he has maybe the best players on this team of all those other assistants.
Right. I think this is the best team of the assistants, as you just said, that Nick Saban is going to face. Honestly, as boring as it sounds, this game to me just really comes down to the offensive line of Georgia. Because at some point
you're talking to parents of two offensive linemen, so we're good with that, just so you know.
But if at some point we can talk all we want about they've got to take deep shots and they're not going to, but you got to be able to win in the trenches and run the football and kind of beat them at their game and win your game. That's what Georgia does. So you're not going to come out here and start throwing the ball vertically without the balance of the run game. Georgia's run the ball more than any other team in the country. I believe it is 68% of the time. They're certainly in the top five. 68% of their offensive
Golic
plays.
had the numbers. They were ridiculous. 670 runs to 270 passes.
It's crazy.
So you're talking, basically 70% of the time you're running the football. So you're not going to come out here and all of a sudden become the spread team. They've got to run the football. They've got to win up front. And if they can't control that off the defensive front and wear Alabama down, which Alabama is still thin at that linebacker spot, I just don't see them being able to pull off this win.
And you know what else is amazing what Alabama does is the transition they have to go through. This is now their fourth national championship game where they're transitioning a coordinator. Yeah. You go back to 2011, Jim McElwain transitioned. Got hired as a head coach before the title game. Colorado State, Kirby Smart, obviously with Georgia. We know the whole Lane Kiffin deal that went on. And then now this year, Jeremy Pruitt. Remember, their D coordinator right now is a head coach of Tennessee. But he's staying here and he's being the coordinator of that team until he leaves. So to have to transition, and we know how difficult that is, especially this year, was that first early signing period. So Jeremy Pruitt, a guy like Scott Frost, who coached UCF in the bowl game, but Nebraska have to go through that early signing period. So that could be a difficult transition, and Alabama's kind of used to that. Just like they're used to being in title games, they're used to transitioning their top coaches onto head coaching jobs somewhere else.
And they do it very well, by the way. We talk about the championship game. Again, you can see it on ESPN. You can listen to it on ESPN Radio or also on the ESPN app. Let's not forget the Megacast, which is pretty cool. We have alternative ways, 10 additional platforms, voices expanded. We have 5 ESPN-centric shows on one screen. We got quarterback Aaron Murray, former Georgia player, talking about it. We got the coaches' film room with Mike Bobo, Pat Fitzgerald, Kevin Sumlin among the coaches there. We got the command center and data center available. ESPN3 specializes in alternative views, Skycam, Highcam, all 22 among others. Pretty soon we're going to have the Golic belly button cam, I think.
Listen, this is...
By the way, I would watch, because I don't know what's in there.
It's a little bit of lint.
And a lot of food particles.
But the one thing I'll say, it's great ways to watch the game. Where's the O-line room?
Yeah, we need that.
Where's the? I should say O-line, D-line room.
Love it. Is that the coach's room?
Are they going to? I want a room that concentrates on especially in this game.
That would be the least viewed show in the history of Megacast.
It absolutely would not. Because
who the hell is going to watch an offensive line room?
No, O-line, D-line. O-line, D-line.
Get out.
This game is going to be won on the O-line, D-line. The snacks that would be in that room would be unprecedented. So I cannot believe there is not a telecast with O-line, D-line.
Dang it, Todd. At the end of the day, football always comes down to one thing. One wall of men dominating another wall of men, and that lets everything else happen. And that's going to be how this game plays out. Will Alabama choke out that Georgia offense, or will Georgia's offensive line be able to wear down Alabama like they did against Oklahoma? Don't at me. Todd, we appreciate you being with us, my friend. We'll look forward. You'll be on SportsCenter tonight with Scott Van Pelt after the game, right? Yep. So your traveling plans are
interesting.
Just like ours. We get it. Thanks for being with us, my friend.
Right,
Todd McShay, the one and only Todd McShay, with us here on Golic and Wingo.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
Let's not expect too much. There's only one person out there that's expecting way too much out of this guy too early. We know who that is. It's his father.
David Pollack is here, college football analyst, three-time All-American at the University of Georgia. Big part of the experience leading up to the game tonight. Again, if you're watching us on ESPN2, the field is behind us where Alabama and Georgia will play it out for the national championship. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests joined us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And as we occasionally do, Mike, we have dressed the set with donuts.
Yes, we have.
Because you are a donut connoisseur.
Yes, I am.
Oh, you just stuffed your face with a donut before.
I occasionally nibble
you dabble
on the donuts. I dabble in the donuts.
Nibble? Those are huge bites. That was not nibbles.
Oh, well, we'll find out pretty soon here, because David Pollack, you look at him now and you think, oh, he probably was a safety, maybe a slot receiver when he played in the NFL. No, you were a defensive lineman and a linebacker.
Yeah.
I did his games when he was in Georgia.
He was out to here when he played.
It's a big end.
A lot of thickness.
Your neck size is what now?
I don't know.
I'm going to guess
that's where you went. You asked his neck size.
What was do you know what your neck size when you played?
It was plus 20. I can promise you.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
It was aggressive.
So he has gone basically to half of what he was, and one of the reasons that we have the donuts on the table, because you said earlier this year that if Georgia somehow made it to the national championship game, you would eat. What, 12 donuts?
I think it was 3 for making it, 3 for winning the first one, and then we kept adding to it.
So we're at least 9 then. We're at least 9 donuts that you said you would do. Right?
I think we're at 6, but okay, if they win tonight,
okay,
I think
we're at 6.
We go even higher.
And when's the last time you had a donut?
I have not had a donut in at least 10 years.
When's the last time you had sugar?
I haven't had a sweet. I mean, I have sugar and fruit, but I haven't had a sweet in 10 plus years.
What is wrong with you?
Wow.
Listen,
it looks great, so I guess maybe not a whole lot.
Well, you look fine. You eat sweets.
Listen.
I look like garbage, but I admit that. I mean, I own my garbage.
I have a very addictive personality. Alcohol, gambling, that kind of stuff wouldn't be good for me. Okay,
right.
So I don't need to start the sweets too. Once we stopped, and we couldn't go back. I mean, there's no returning.
So you like at least 6 now, maybe 9. We're just asking for 1. Are you gonna pay this off at the end of this segment and you'll eat a donut?
I don't see why not.
Okay, there we go.
I guess.
Wow.
That might be the biggest upset no matter what else happens in this stadium.
The internet is going to explode.
I have to do it anyways, but I'm just letting you know this counts for one of my other ones.
Yes, it does. Yes. And by the way, that is the Straight Talk. Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Okay, we have to save plenty of room at the end of this segment to make sure David pays off.
Hey, I'll make it easy. I'll leave one with you.
Y'all don't mind that at all. It doesn't seem like it.
That would not count as one of your other ones, just so you know.
That's perfect. We all eat one together. That's 3.
No, you got to eat them all. So we'll get to that a little bit later, and we'll get to the national championship game here in a minute. But again, you were a defensive player in the NFL for the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike had to deal with this when he was playing for the Eagles. Sometimes that offense just didn't quite do what they wanted to do. As a defensive player, put yourself in the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive meeting rooms, right? I mean, that defense is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Top to bottom. They closed out the game with an incredible interception by Jalen Ramsey, although some people in Pittsburgh are like, how is that different from Jesse James's non-touchdown?
With the Ben Koyak catch?
Or the Jalen Ramsey catch.
Interception.
Which was the interception.
Right. Gotcha.
How is that different from the game against the Patriots? But at the end of the day, they still have a game to play. They have an opportunity to move on to the AFC Championship game against a team they've beaten. How do you say, we get it. The offense and Blake is struggling, but we got to make sure we're together as a team.
Well, you just try to you try to do it all then. And I vividly remember Georgia, and Mike was covering our games then too, is we didn't have a great offense. And, we knew what we had to do. And I remember we played Vanderbilt, and we were up at the half, or Vanderbilt was up at the half 2-0. It was 2-0. And it was a miserable performance from our offense. Offense goes down the field and kicks a field goal, and I look at Thomas Davis and Odell Thurman, and I said, ball game.
Yep.
I mean, so that's what they got to understand. That they just got to play great, and they got to understand that it's going to ride on them. Listen, the Baltimore Ravens won a Super Bowl with just defense, and obviously Trent Dilfer did pretty good, but they were scoring.
Broncos did it. Super Bowl 50, basically.
They got to find ways to create turnovers, help their offense as much as possible. You're not expecting that offense to go bananas. It's not going to happen.
And also, talk about in that locker room what the air has to be. I mean, the defense, while in their own meetings, may be like, hey, guys, we got to take care of business.
Yeah.
But in that team meeting, they have to be behind that
We believe you, Blake.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I know you had more rushing yards than passing yards, but we still won.
Yeah.
We'll need you next week. You know, I thought was bizarre. Did you think it was bizarre when he was talking about he didn't have his first pitch and you got to go to your off-speed pitch in the interview after the game? I was like,
no.
I've never heard a quarterback say that.
No.
Like, I didn't have my fastball. Well, okay.
You play golf, right?
Very little.
Okay, we were talking about someone brought in. It's like he had the yips.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it wasn't like he was missing tight windows. These were screens.
Yeah,
These
short
were
passes.
It's pretty documented how
open.
bad people, have hated on him and how much pressure is on him. I mean, you could tell he's feeling it. And to address that and say that kind of stuff, it was kind of strange.
But as David Pollack is here with us, we're here in Atlanta for the national championship game. That's what's so weird because there was a 3-game stretch down the end of the regular season.
Played great.
13, 14, 15. First time in his career. 3 straight games, multiple touchdown passes, no interceptions. And then 16 and 17 were terrible. And that might have been the worst game I've seen him play in a long time.
I started him on my fantasy team for the championship game.
How'd that work out?
It worked out great. It was garbage time, and he got 380 yards
San Francisco.
Yes,
absolutely.
It was amazing. But it's not fantasy's not reality. But he's got to find a way, obviously, to help his team out because they can run the football too, and they got several backs, and it wasn't pretty the other day.
No, it wasn't. And the other game on Sunday, obviously, was the Saints and the Panthers. And as a former defensive player, you have to love the way the Saints have made this team into not just about Drew Brees and not just about his arm, but it's about the running game and also that defense. They closed out Carolina with a sack.
They've never played defense. They've never played. I mean, you always felt bad for Drew Brees. It was kind of Peyton Manning-esque.
Right.
You know, he had to go out every year and
when he was with the Colts.
Yes, when he was with the Colts, throw for so many yards and score the ball and never had a running game and never had a defense. And now all of a sudden, one great draft and you're right there in the mix and you're playing great defense. And Kamara's been one of the most fun players to watch in all of football.
He has,
because here's the thing, Darren Sproles was fun to use, but Darren Sproles was slightly built. You couldn't ride him. I mean, this guy is obviously a little bit thicker, but the versatility he brings and then, you know, the way they closed it out, gave it the big play to McCaffrey, but then got the Cameron Hayward was
He was absolute
man down the
beast
stretch.
going through 1, 2, and sometimes 3 people. But to your point, Kamara on offense, Lattimore on defense, the draft picks really, really paying off for them. All right, as we look ahead to the national championship game tonight, Georgia against Alabama. First, preparation. As ball players, we are always preparing for games, some bigger than others. Is it an advantage in your mind that basically all the players on Alabama are used to this stage? And for Georgia, as we know, it's been 37 years since a national championship or just and more than a few years since the monster stage. Yeah. Is that a difference? Is there an advantage?
I think you have to look at that and you have to say it's somewhat of an advantage, but you also know too, like it's also kind of old hat for some of those Bama guys and Georgia fans, these kids grew up on this for their lifetime going, I want to win a championship, I want to do this, and at Georgia, it hadn't happened since Herschel was there. Right. And I don't know if you see him. I mean, he still looks like he's 30.
Here.
But he's, he looks like he's 30, but he's not.
I believe we're staring down the gun barrel at Herschel Walker.
Former teammate of mine in Philadelphia many years ago.
So obviously, it's been a long time. So I think the excitement and the emotion is going to, and the adrenaline is going to be there in full force. Now, does that lead to some nerves? And does that lead to some early mistakes? Because I'll say this. I thought early in the game at the Rose Bowl, I thought Georgia played with a little bit of nerve. And they struggled a little bit and defensively putting their eyes where they belonged. And offensively, you saw Fraud miss a few throws early. But, that's going to be the interesting thing. I think you're going to know really early. And if they struggle out the gates against Bama, it's obviously a different animal.
Was there to you, just a settling in difference in the second half or a true X's and O's adjustment? There's always adjustments made, I know that, but was it more adjustment or more that they just kind of settled in and played?
It was both of them, to be honest. But listen, here's the thing. When you can't, it's baptism by fire. You cannot replicate that tempo. And Georgia did it for 3 weeks, in practice. Oklahoma lives it. That's what they do every day, all day of the year. I mean, they are a tempo team all the time. So you saw it early. They're getting lined up. Georgia didn't even get lined up several plays, and they're snapping the football, and you make mistakes. And here's the thing. Lining up, knowing your tendencies, playing your side, but then somebody goes in motion, you're like, which one of y'all kicked me? You know what I mean? You're trying to figure everything out. So I think you could see at the end of the second quarter, the eyeballs started to slow down. The eyeballs started to get dialed in. They started to make them earn it a little bit more. And then they got more physical. They got more aggressive. Listen, Andrews didn't go anywhere without getting beat up. I mean, they put their hands on him everywhere. They hit Mayfield a couple times, and you could tell that rattled him a little bit or sped up his clock a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the offense was already doing their thing. So it was more aggressiveness, more people near the line of scrimmage, more physicality, but also they got used to the tempo.
David Pollack here with us on Golic and Wingo as we are here in Atlanta for the national championship game tonight. And what you just said, I thought was the best thing Kirby Smart did. As he was coming off the field at halftime at the Rose Bowl, he admitted it. Hey, look, we're playing way too fast. We just need to go in and calm down and play our ball. And he said, let's play our best 30 minutes, and we'll see what happens. And obviously it was good enough as they won in overtime. So if we spin this forward, and let's assume, for the sake of this discussion, that they don't have that sort of bright lights, big city moment against Alabama in the first half. Let's say Georgia comes out and plays their best football for 60 minutes. And Alabama, as we expect them to do, will play their best football for 60 minutes. If both teams are on their A game, what do you expect?
I expect both to be on their A game, and I expect it to be a more defensive slugfest. Who makes the mistake? Who makes the turnover? And one thing that I'll lean towards Georgia on is special teams. Rodrigo, you saw him last game, hit a 55-yarder, huge play. I think you could depend on them. And what you've seen from Alabama when they have lost, they have been beating special teams. Kick six come to mind. You talk about Ole Miss fumbles. You've seen LSU, the game of the century. Listen, we can't point to many losses for Bama over the years, but you've seen special teams play a part in that. So I think if both played their best games, I think it's very, very even, and whoever could maybe win that special teams battle, which I would give the advantage to Georgia, so I'd say, I guess, Georgia. Now, that's if everybody played great.
Right. Talk about the one guy, and I think could be the X factor, and it's interesting the similarity. 37 years ago when Georgia won the national championship, they beat Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, and there was a certain freshman that did really well in that game. A guy named Herschel Walker.
He was pretty good.
You got a freshman in this game, Jake Fromm, who got the job early on. First start was up at Notre Dame and gets that win there. So talk about, I use the word poise, and forgetting even a freshman, I think he's got poise even if he were a senior, of how well he's playing and the importance of him. I think it's going to be hard for Georgia to just line up and run. If this guy can hit a few over the linebackers and get them at least on their heels a little or to thinking about that, I think that could be a huge difference in the game. Give us your breakdown of Fromm.
Nobody who watches football believes Georgia's going to line up and pound Alabama. That ain't happening. Nobody's doing that. They're not going to allow you to do that. So you're going to have to trust your young quarterback to make plays. You trust his poise. There's no doubt. Like he's unflappable. He's even-keeled. Can he make the plays down the field with his arm? The best ball he throws is a back shoulder fade. Mm-hmm. He throws the deep ball well. That's what you have to do to Alabama. You have to take shots, and he's done an amazing job. And listen, the whole season has been great for Georgia. It's all laid out. The stars have aligned. If you think about it, the four guys that stay, Bellamy, Carter, Michelle, Chubb, they stay, they provide depth, they provide pop. You're here because of that. Think about the injury to Jacob Eason to start the season. Now Fromm gets a taste, and you go, oh, he's pretty good.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
We're going to leave him in there. And then you talk about 0 season-ending injuries. They haven't had one season-ending injury this year. This program isn't in a point like it is with Alabama where you can put next guy in, next five-star. They're not as deep, and so it's kind of been a perfect storm for Georgia. Now they come into here healthy. Their quarterback's a lot more seasoned. By the way, do you trust him? 2 minutes left in the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma's defense, not near the same animal. He goes down the field and he gets you a touchdown. So I think you do trust him, and you got to put the ball in his hands tonight on 1st and 10. The problem, it sucks when it's 2nd and 10 and you miss. Right. But you have to do some of that.
When they were throwing on 1st and 10, man, what a dangerous offense can be when you're 2nd and 4.
I think he was 9 out of 10.
It was ridiculous. And the thing about it is, you talk about a freshman quarterback and you can't be afraid to put it in his hands. And they're not. You are going to head and take your chances with him. It's not like we have to pare anything down. He's got the playbook, and I think there's a lot of trust in him.
No, and there should be. I mean, you look at 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and he's been very even-keeled. The moment's never been too big. So how much time do we have left, Trey? Because if I keep talking, we might get through the ending here.
We're making sure that's not.
I have one goal. I'm going to drop a filibuster up in this piece, man.
I have one goal here. My job is very simple, to leave enough time for you to inhale a donut. We're Golic and Wingo live from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta for the College Football Playoff National Championship game, which is presented by Progressive Insurance. Nothing will be more progressive in this segment than David eating that donut. it seems like we spent a lot of time talking about Georgia and how they can win and what they need to do to win. On the other side is Alabama, and I almost get the feeling like because people are talking about Georgia and these things, and they're like, hey, we're just here. This is what we do. Yeah. You can go ahead and doubt us all you want. We're just going to show up and be the Alabama that we know we are.
I think we saw that in the Sugar Bowl, huh?
Boy, didn't we.
When they kicked Clemson right in the teeth.
Just squeezed the life out of them. They just squeezed the life out of them.
And listen, they had those 4 weeks for everybody to go, Ohio State should have been in. And Nick didn't need a sports psychologist that he's got on call 24/7.
No rat poison necessary.
He didn't need any of that. I mean, he was able to keep him motivated. I talked to an Alabama player yesterday that literally said those practices for the bowl game was by far the most physical and best practices of their season. Every single one of them was back-to-back physical, and then you saw them come out and play, and they played their best game. And defensively, they looked great. They didn't rush the passer great down the stretch of the season. They pressured Kelly Bryant on 50% of his throws. I mean, they literally look like a different guy. Anthony Jennings got hurt, which is unfortunate because I think he was the best player on the field that night. Just adds to the injuries which they've had this season have compounded upon each other. But, yeah, Alabama's going to do Alabama. The 5 championship games under Saban, by the way, 0 turnovers.
That's crazy.
It's ridiculous.
0.
So they're not going to lose the game.
No.
And that is so Belichick.
I was just going to say, let the other team make a mistake. We take advantage of it. And you mentioned the practices. It's interesting. The comparison I would make was Jimmy Johnson in Dallas. Yeah. The years they won those first couple of Super Bowls. I remember talking to those guys saying our Super Bowl week practices were crazy. I mean, that's when they put pads on. Now you don't allow 14 padded practices and stuff. Back then you could have pads on. We'd have pads on Fridays on times. He said those were some of the hardest practices we had getting ready for the Super Bowl. So like Nick Saban is doing now and has done, where is their weakness? Where do you attack them? What can you try and force them to do to give you the edge?
Well, offensively, you have to make Jalen Hurts pass the football. He's a winner. He's 25-2 as a starter, and his touchdown-interception ratio looks like he'd be the best decision-maker in college football. It's 17-1. But he's not a progression passer. He's not a guy that's going to go 1, 2, 3 and really kill you. So if I'm playing against them, I'm making him pass the football. I'm committing more guys to the run. He loves to throw short stuff. I'm taking that away. He loves to throw quick stuff over the middle of the field. I'm taking that away. I'm making him beat me down the field. And listen, I think that's the weakness of the Georgia defense. They give up. They are susceptible to big plays down the field. Can he make them pay for that? And then if you flip it on the other side, Bama's good, and they're better. They're good up front, and they're good. But they're not as good as they used to be. Their corners are very small guys. They're great players. They're physical. They're technicians. Wims on the outside, I think, is the key to the game for Georgia. Yeah. He's 6'4". He's an enormous target. He's got to win the jump balls. You got to make those shots down the field because again, Nick, just like Kirby, he's not going to let you line up and run those tailbacks. Michelle and Chubb ain't doing what they did to Oklahoma.
No chance.
There ain't no chance. At half, Michelle averaged 49 yards a carry.
Yeah.
Chubb averaged 15.
Yeah.
They might not have 2 15-yard. They might not have 2 15-yard runs the whole game. I mean, it's going to be. You have to earn it.
Yeah, the Jalen Hurts point is great because on the first touchdown pass to Calvin Ridley in the Sugar Bowl, yes, he was wide open at the beginning of the play, and Hurts didn't see him. Yep. And then when he was on the move, he found him and made a great play there. You mentioned the injuries to Alabama, and we'll be quick here because we have something else we need to do. We got Minkah Fitzpatrick with the kidney injury. How much do you think the injuries may hamper the strength of Alabama here?
Well, it hampers them because Anthony Jennings is not going to play. Cotton, their right guard's out. I mean, now he rotated, so I don't think that's as big as a blow. But, I mean, it's just the totality of the injuries throughout the season that's kind of added up. And, Alabama's Alabama, and they're not going to have guys that come in that are scrubs. They got
future NFL players are their substitutes.
They got a lot of stars next to their name.
Here comes our 2-star.
It's just not.
Here comes a 4th-round pick.
But if you can get the depth going, and you can't. Last year the tempo was the big thing for Clemson. If you can have them playing more players that aren't as familiar with the system, and like Mosley plays at linebacker, he's light in the high knee. He's 210 pounds, maybe. I mean, you want to get to some of those guys and physicality, run game, and stuff like that. And let's keep going.
We're done. Okay, so for those of you not watching on ESPN2, David Pollack is paying off a bet. He said he would eat donuts if Georgia made it to the national championship game.
Which one's the smallest one?
He has not the biggest one. Go for it. Go for the one with all the sugar and all the sprinkles. He's surveying a tray of donuts right now. He hasn't had a sweet or a donut in 10 years. He's picked up, looked like a Krispy Kreme glaze.
Yeah.
Looks very solid.
Is that good?
Golic's watering at the idea.
Back off, Barbie.
Again, he hasn't had a donut or sugar.
No.
10 years.
Golic, you want to lead off and show him how to do it?
Yeah, it's really
Golic is taking that and just inhale the entire thing.
That is a massive bite. You just got in there, didn't you?
Let's go.
So on a roll.
Let's go, David. And he is ingesting the donut. He's got the first bite. He seems to be okay.
When it hits your lips,
it feels so good when it hits your lips. He's now doing old school Will Ferrell.
I will admit, it's really good.
Go ahead.
Get in there on that.
Polish the whole thing.
Go on.
Hold on. Good Lord.
No. You got to eat a ton of these. All right, second bite down. No, let's see. You just got to be aggressive.
Well, you went and did that. Somebody needs to be play-by-play. You just gave that up.
Who's going to talk now?
I'm busy at the moment. You got to finish it for me, guys. You got halfway? Go ahead.
I'll just go ahead and go with this one. I'll go Trey on this.
Go ahead and get it done. Wow. Well done. First donut, or artificial sugar, I should say, in 10 years. 10 years. Now, you're supposed to eat more of those. We'll let you do that on your own time. We just wanted to start that thing off. I have a feeling, though, it's going to wake up some of those senses that haven't been woken up in a while for you. I want to be jonesing for donuts later.
I want to see him in 10 minutes. He's going to be shaking. He's going to be over the fetal position.
He's going to be over the corner with a Toblerone.
I got too much energy anyways. I'm going to be all over the place. We don't need any more of that.
Well done on your part.
I'll tell you what.
Way to pay it off.
Y'all were two of the most shocked people I've ever seen when I told you
I didn't think you were going to do it. I didn't think you were going to do it.
Oh,
so kudos to you.
I had to do it. Come on.
10 years. I couldn't go 10 days without that. But it's impressive. It looks great.
You've been doing something different.
I've been doing them.
You haven't been killing them like you used to.
I've been killing them less.
Speaking of having some donuts, he had some donuts in his neck.
We had it over the collar.
Yeah,
we had it over the collar.
Oh, yeah. I was sitting on an air hose. I mean, there's just no doubt about that.
David, well done.
David.
We appreciate that.
Well done.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for stopping by. David Pollack with us here, and he ate the donut.
This has been the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast. Make sure to subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, and to listen every weekday morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPN2, and the ESPN app.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Disclaimer. You will not be transported to the top of the world. In the unlikely event you find yourself in the Arctic Circle, seek shelter from the elements immediately to avoid frostbite and or hypothermia. Geico will not be responsible if you find yourself in a cave or crevasse with a lonely abominable snowman, who in all likelihood will force you to play games including but not limited to Go Fish, charades, Chinese checkers, or his personal favorite, Red Rover, send Yeti on over. Geico is not liable for any damages, either physical or emotional.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.